turn this big tank around here. Good to be here again. You know, these lessons here, when I get to study them, they get more and more interesting. In fact, when they make you want to go look for something else, somewhere, and say, well, I heard about this before. I've heard this name before. Let me see where I heard this before. But it just gets so interesting, and sometimes I catch myself getting off the subject of what the lesson was about. The pronunciations and all like that are really, really catchy. But here lately, we've been not jumping back and forth from the New to the Old Testament, but the New Testament actually certifies the Old Testament. Because a lot of stuff in the Old Testament, they tell you it's going to happen, and it happens, and then it happens, and it comes back up again in the New Testament. And I like how these lessons here are in the sequence that they should be. The one for today, Isaac calls on the name of the Lord. And we know that Isaac was the true son of Abraham. And they say that the apple don't fall too far from the tree. Isaac, like his daddy, has done a few things there. But the Lord had already promised Abraham that he was going to take care of his family. They were going to grow and they were going to be prosperous. So we examined the circumstances in which God granted covenant protection to Abraham and his descendants. This week we're going to explore how God showed himself faithful to those promises. Now, after the death of Abraham, the focus in Genesis shifts to Abraham's heirs. One of them was Isaac. In the conventional promises to Abraham, God committed to ensuring security and growth for Abraham's family. The family line continued to a third generation. Isaac was the child of God's promises. If you recall the lesson last week, Abraham went and had a child by their the housemaid or mistress who was there. But Abraham at that time, about 100 years old, didn't think he won't ever have a child anyway. Yeah. And then God gave him a child, which is Isaac. So Isaac was the child of God's promises, the one to inherit the covenant blessings. The security of Isaac's family was not yet clear, but some of the same patterns of Abraham's life were repeated in Isaac's. One of them was that he became a wanderer in foreign lands, like his father. And God directed Isaac where he should go and promised him the same things that were promised to Abraham's: land, innumerable descendants, and a blessing for other nations. Well, anyway, Isaac experienced a lot of tensions with his neighbors and faced competition for resources. Lack of familiar ties would have made him seem suspicious wherever he went. Some of those things that he had experienced, there were several times, and getting back to the agricultural type society, one of the things they had to have around was water. Several times when Isaac, in his travel, found water, and the natives in that area came and told him, no, that's not your water. Some of the areas that they found water, they covered it up, so Isaac kept moving around and kept moving around. In some of those encounters with the water, one of the things back in those times, there's a reason why he said, thou shalt not covet. They were the natives would try their best to see how much they can cover some of the people that they dealt with their wife. So Isaac told them that his wife, Rebecca, was his sister. Several times he did that. Now, there was still a little bit of tension due to the fact that that area that Isaac was in, at this time, was run by a Philistine king by the name of Abimelech. When they ran Abraham out of there, and it was again over water and over what Abraham had for his possessions. Again, agricultural type society. One of the biggest things was water. So Isaac is looking for a place around where he was so that he could continue what he had to do, his family and his descendants to survive. Now, Abraham and Isaac both came to conflict with the Philistines over those water resources like ahead. And since they were herders in the Negev, and as for the desert, the region received less than 10 inches of rain per year. They relied on finding their water. God reiterated the same promises to Isaac, but Isaac had new problems. The former allies had become the enemies, and he was eager to know whether God would prove faithful in this situation. So, as we got that background, if I can get a reader to read an altar for the Word of God, Genesis 26, verses 24 through 27.
The night that the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. Isaac built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord. Then he pitched his tent, and there his servants dug a well. Meanwhile, Amalek had come to him from Gerar. Is that right?
That's correct,
Gerar.
yeah.
Thank you. What's that?
Azuzah,
Azuzah, his personal advisor, and
Philco,
Pickup, the commander of his forces. Isaac asked them, why have you come to me, since you were hostile to me and sent me away?
Okay, thank you, sis. It started already with water. It already faced a lot of conflicts over those rights there, but Isaac departed for Beersheba. That's one of those names that I said it sounded familiar to me. Beersheba was just where the Iraqis attacked and the bomb blew up that hospital. It's still there. It's still there. Abraham previously lived, and the previous Philistine king had made a covenant. Beersheba is located about 75 miles southwest of Jerusalem, at the northern tip of the Negev. Now, when you're talking about desert, it ain't desert. We knew why, we still know today why they call the promised land the promised land, and one of the reasons why is because they're going to drink from wells to say that they didn't dig. But when you did find water, it became a cherished commodity. You got to have that. Not only are we talking about it in the biblical days, you know the reason why a lot of those big cities we have here in the U.S., why they're there? Look at the Great Lakes. You go further out to Nevada, in the Midwest, they're all around water because they're going to need water. We started out as an agricultural type society also, but we still need it today. Still need it today. Now, God highlighted Isaac's unique role as he offered encouragement to Isaac. And the expression here in that 24th verse is fear not, sometimes appears in scriptures accounts for angelic appearances. Now, God did not speak directly. He spoke to them through angels. Spoke to them through angels. And sometimes a voice with more than one person heard, or just that person who the message is directed to. But the key to it is though that you have to have faith. What made it successful in working along with God. Now, The admonition likely here targeted Isaac's fear of the circumstances because Isaac did not need to fear. He knew he didn't need to fear. Fear is man-made. Fear is something that's cognitive. When God gave us the ability to touch, to smell, to see, to hear, to taste, he didn't give us one of those analogies that included fear. We get that from what we pick up during our lives. So fear was not something that instilled in us by God. God promised to remain with Isaac and bless him as God would multiply his descendants. God's covenant with Abraham transcended generational boundaries, benefiting Isaac and his descendants. If Isaac doubted whether God would show concern, he could rely on the fact that God would honor his previous promises to Abraham. Now, both Abraham and Isaac built altars as places for sacrifice and prayer. Abraham built an altar to mark off the territory of Canaan for his family and to create memorials in the place where God had appeared. Isaac's son, Jacob, would also build an altar. You know, those two sons, Jacob and Esau, also descendants of Abraham, both went through some things, but they all managed to be able to come out on top because God had a covenant with Abraham the entire time. At the altar that Isaac called upon the name of the Lord for protection and guidance and made this location his home as he pitched his tent there. Verse 26, then Amalek went to him from Gerar, and Azusa, one of his friends, and Philcol, the chief captain of his army. Azusa was from that area, Gerar, it's the northern tip of Egypt. You know, the Shir, Beersheba, 75 miles south of Jerusalem, and you got that upper tip of Egypt. So it wasn't far for him to go up there. And he was sort of like a consultant for Abimelech. He was a consultant. And of course, you know, with everything that they got from those people, they went and took over their property and everything. Apparently, this guy told Abimelech, you might want to look at him differently. I just assumed that. That's just not something that I read because, you see, things are going to change. It's going to change. And Isaac didn't get afraid of it. Now, regarding to his wife, Isaac did use some deception. He told him that Rebekah was his daughter. One of the people might have likely seen that maybe that was his wife, and the people might likely have seen at the same time all that Isaac had. You know, to have a lot of cattle, you got to have a lot of grain, you got to have a lot of everything. And remember, God told Abraham that he was going to allow his ancestors to obtain all of this. Watch the change in Abimelech. Now, the people from Gerar had proved to be fearsome defenders of their water resources. They had closed Abraham's wells before, a hostile act that risked destroying Isaac's flocks, throwing him into poverty, or perhaps maybe even killing him. These narratives here imply that Isaac had headed toward Beersheba to escape this conflict. However, the conflict seemed to be following Isaac. But they showed up here. Word get around, hey, this guy Isaac, he got a lot. he might have something going on good here that we could use. So Abimelech brought two of his highest officials. The designation friends, we call them friends, refers to the king's associates and advisors, like modern day leaders. Now God blessed Isaac and his wife Rebekah with twin boys, Jacob and Esau. Isaac was the child of God's promise to Abraham. Now, although there was another son, wasn't really recognized the promise that God told Abraham that he was going to give him. The security of Isaac's family was not yet clear at that time. So what we're looking at here is 27 here. It says, and Isaac said unto them, wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? So he's still skipping around until he gets to that location. Abimelech shows up. His question, Isaac's question, implied both surprise and fear upon seeing the unexpected visitor. Even through all the mistreatment that Isaac had faced at the hands of Abimelech's men, had forced him to leave Gerar. Isaac used the word hate here. Can refer to a feeling of animosity towards someone else. The aggressive actions of Abimelech and his people against Isaac's household that they had gone through. Now, although Abimelech had a positive relationship with Abraham, eventually the Philistines treated Isaac with disdain and pushed him out of their territory. So Isaac was left wondering what reason Abimelech could have pursuing him to Beersheba. It makes you want to think, and all of a sudden someone show up, start acting sort of nice to you after you've been through it before. And I know what we think, you must want something. You gotta want something. You show up like that, didn't go and grabbing his family and beat him around and everything. So, and keep in mind, he had these folks with him that was giving him a lot of advice. So Abimelech and his advisors had not come to make trouble by Isaac. On the contrary, they were afraid of him. So let's take a look at verses 27 through, 33. If I can get a reader, please.
They answered, we saw clearly that the Lord was with you. So we said, there ought to be a sworn agreement between us and you. Let us make a treaty with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we did not harm you, but always treated you well and sent you away peacefully. And now you are blessed by the Lord. Isaac then made a feast for them, and they ate and drank. Early the next morning, the men swore an oath to each other. Then Isaac sent them on their way, and they went away peacefully. That day Isaac's servant came and told him about the well they had dug. They said, we found water. He called it Sheba, and to this day the name of the town has been Beersheba.
The name again, I read it a couple times, I know I heard of it. But, so Abimelech and his advisors had not come to make trouble. And they had observed the power of the Lord through Isaac's abundance of harvest, growth, wealth, had convinced them that Isaac enjoyed a divine favor. Their admission that the Lord was with Isaac doesn't mean that they had come to become followers of the one true God of Abraham and Isaac. And keep in mind, these advisors came from that area Well, they had known of the Lord. And they put that two and two together. How did this guy get all this that he had? Now, many of the people in the Near East would believe that numerous gods existed, and a wise person would avoid offending the most powerful gods and the people under the protection of these gods. These gods that we're talking about, some of them also came from the Egyptian period. You know, back studying Bible school back, say, about a year and a half ago, I had all these different gods. Some of that stuff continued to pass on down the line. Had a god for everything. Got a god for dirt, god for water. That one god, that woman that looked like a frog, had a frog's head, a woman's body, all kind of different things. Sun god. So, if you take a look at how the seasons change, I would probably think myself that that God was only good for a certain period. Because it gets cold sometimes. I don't know if they had a god of cold or whatever, but those gods were for those different periods of those things that they had become abundant to them. But again, a wise person would avoid offending the most powerful of gods and the people that were under the protection of the God. The people under the protection of the God. The same God that had the covenant with Abraham. Now, Abimelech suggested that they swear an oath and make a covenant with one another. The oath and covenant is pretty close to being the same thing. A lot of times you see them occur together. There is one difference in it though. The connection between oath and covenant lies in the mechanics of the covenant making, and the two sides put the covenant to effect by swearing an oath. An oath was a conditional curse to place on oneself. Nowadays, when you take an oath, when you get married, that's an oath. If you go outside of that oath, there's something that you take with you if you had violated the oath. You go buy a car. That's a covenant. Some say, yeah, you probably still hurt yourself to come up with bad credit. But that person that you had that covenant with, come and get that car. So you see, the oath is something that is going to stay within you. The covenant is something that you make with someone else, to including God. And we know what happens when we violated God's covenants. We talk about the pestilence and being thirsty, not having any rain, and all those different things. Okay? Excuse me. So that's the connection between the two. The potential curses that could be elaborated are also listed in Deuteronomy. Some of them I just finished listing. The list of curses are threatened against Israel. Abimelech spoke in technical language of ancient diplomacy when he proposed his arrangement with Isaac. Now, this type of agreement is called a parity treaty, which means a commitment between two parties. A commitment between two parties. While the Philistines had previously envied and disrespected Isaac, now they treated him with honor and expected for someone with equal status. Someone with equal status. We take a look at 29 there. That thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now blessed of the Lord. You would think that Isaac had all of this property, and Abimelech, he and his people were probably lacking. See how things are coming together? Isaac can start business with Abimelech. He's got the cattle, he's got the crops, he's got the water. So there's something that each of them needed from each other. Okay? It's just like, let's take a look at a bank. I had cousins that used to rob them all the time. That's the way of life for them. You go rob the bank, bank don't lose money. People think bank lose money. Bank don't lose money. The government doesn't lose money. You know why? Why would I rob the bank? Why would I need the money? I'm going to put it right back into the financial system, right? Yeah. So what's the loss between him? Hey, you can have his water, you can have his land, and now we all here together. But there's a punishment behind them when you're going to rob a bank. That would have been something else different if Abimelech had gone beyond or behind the covenant and the oath that they made together. Because without Isaac, him or his people wouldn't even be able to live. And plus, he's got a protectorate over him in God. So, Abimelech claimed that he and his men had not harmed Isaac. They didn't. They had done only good to him and sent him away in peace. Abimelech's words appear one-sided as Isaac had left Gerar after experiencing maltreatment earlier. That was early in his life. Now, some of the things, there are probably some explanations here why Abimelech was treating him this way, is that first, Abimelech might have referred to his immediate attentions right then and there. His immediate attentions. We need this guy. Okay? And second, Abimelech could have been asking Isaac to dismiss the prior behavior of Abimelech's people. In either case, the ruler of Gerar asked Isaac for peace between them. Thus, in a surprising display of divine providence, Isaac's enemies suddenly became friends. 30 says that he made them a feast, and they did eat and drink. Isaac turned the hospitality toward his new allies and friends. This feast, like a lot of feasts back in those days, cemented their new relationship. Feasting, again, was a tool for building a lot of alliances. Same as in marriages and funerals, major holidays, or the beginning of business partnerships. This was a business partnership. Covenant ceremonies sometimes included a ritual meal. The leaders of Israel did eat and drink in God's presence after the ritual sacrifice and sprinkling of the blood of the covenant. So serving a meal, Isaac showed his guests expected courtesy, and the feast also completed the ritual that bound them together in peace. It bound them together. So they had a chance to see, hey, this is what we get. They had a chance. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of discussion going on between those sub-leaders and the big leaders about how they were going to work that out, which was part of the oath. It's a win-win type situation here. "31 states, and they rose up bedtimes in the morning and swear one to another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. But the final parts of the ceremony, on the night before, of completing, making the alliance. Parties of their covenant swore that their oaths to one another, asking God to hold them to account if they should break them, and to go in peace. And this means that they not just avoided immediate conflict, but they also anticipated a continuing positive relationship with one another. Peace. We've heard the Hebrew word for it, shalom. Shalom. That word has a wide arrangement of meanings. Outside of being peace, it includes the wholeness of yourself. It means good health. It means success. And it was a favorite term of a lot of the Israelites. And in Judah, it used to reflect the vision of restored order that it talks about in Malachi. And Isaac sent Abimelech away with their conflicts fully resolved. Fully resolved. 32 states. And it came to pass that same day, and Isaac's servants came and told him concerning the well, but they had discovered and dug and said to him, we found water. We got it. Then God took care? Yes, he did. So they were out there in peace with one another. You know, you can sit down and think sometimes, there's enough here for all of us. I see sometimes, I used to see when I was going down towards the Colorado River now, you know, that some farmers still practice with their crops, leaving some on the outer portions so that those that need it can come by and get it. If you ever get a chance to go toward Bend, Texas, right before you go across the Colorado, you're going to see a bunch of watermelons outside of their property. That's for those that pass by and need it, they can pick them up. It's out there. A lot of people still practice that. So Abimelech's party left. Resulted Isaac would have an impression that when they found water, it was a sign of God's blessing and covenant fidelity. As if one blessing for the day was not enough, God also addressed the immediate need for Isaac and his family for survival. Last verse here, 33 states, and he called it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba unto this day. It's a Hebrew word, and that word Sheba stands for oath. It joined the two Hebrew words translated well to become the new name Beersheba. It explains the origination of this new Israelite town, and again it's still occupied today, known as the location of divine blessings. The city became a reminder of the covenants that Isaac and his father Abraham had made and had forged justice between neighbors that used to be against each other. And it stands as an image of God's faithfulness to Abraham. He continued to allow the lineage to proceed and to build them up with the wealth that they had. In conclusion here, Scripture tells us of God that made a lot of covenants with his people. And he followed through on each and every covenant that he made. Long before God rescued the Israelites from Egypt and gave them the law at Mount Sinai, he made a covenant with their ancestor Abraham. And he promised Abraham a homeland and descendants as numerous as the grains of sand and the stars in the sky. He also promised that all families of the earth could be blessed through Abraham and his offspring. Abraham did not see all of the promise fulfilled in his lifetime, but he saw their beginnings when Sarah bore him a son. Now God was with Isaac the whole time when he was searching for water and security. Although, still today, some don't understand how God orchestrated those circumstances, but God turned Isaac's enemies into his allies. Instead of fearing for his life, Isaac's circumstances were changed by God in a matter of days. We have seen God use people that were pagans to help his people out, like Cyrus. They would come out of Babylon. Cyrus was a pagan. He used animals to talk to people, to tell them when you're messing up. Just standing and a bush starts burning next to you. It makes you start thinking. We've all had things that have taken place within our lives, but we know, unless we had told someone else about it, that was a blessing from God. I might not be able to walk a day, or run like I used to, but I know that when I was laying up in that hospital, and that nurse that no one had ever seen before in their life told me, you're going to walk again. I knew that was a message from God. Other nurses on that ward said, we ain't never had no nurses that description. And I thank God every day when I open my eyes that I'll be able to do it. Maybe He didn't want me to do a lot of running around, but He wanted me to stay at the house. Maybe He didn't want me to try to get out there and make all them gardens I used to make. But He still provided. And we see that today. So, with that, man, I know we up today, aren't we? Bro Ross, I know you do it a lot. You want to give a review or give us what you got out of this lesson there today, please?